In this video, I'm gonna be turning recent tab levels into extreme demons, with brutal ship parts, insane memory sections, and Jor Byron, so make sure to stick around. Our first level would be super mega impossible, but if this is attempting to be unplayable, it is far from there. I began by making our first jump into a club set monster. If a level doesn't start this way, then the creator is a fraud. I figured that relying on memory for this level could be a weapon, as I didn't have much here to work with. I ended up creating this fake block, which when side by side looked pretty convincing. After moving some of the structures closer together, I would fill the entire area with these fake blocks to obscure the actual path. While it wasn't the hardest thing out there, the original gameplay was already so unconventional that I doubt many players would guess the path easily. When I approached the next part though, I was completely out of ideas. It looked like the critter forgot to turn swipe off, which made it nearly impossible to come up with anything conventionally difficult here. To compensate, I would end up breathing Burb and his long lost brother, Derb, to life. If you told me these cuties were next to the Mona Lisa, I would believe you. In this final section, you play as a very scuffed UFO that isn't too hard. The issue is that the gameplay was too closed off to have any interesting gimmicks, but was also not closed enough to have difficult gameplay, forcing me to resort to some of the worst spam gameplay imaginable. Diamond Blade looks fun in comparison to this part. After this small segment, however, the level opened up a lot more, and I was able to have an interesting objective. In this part, an orb follows the player, making your clicks have a lot less height. This makes otherwise impossible segments actually playable, and others way more challenging, like the ending, where you'd have to spam faster than the speed of light. I also added a spiky monster named Gargield for good measure. With the first level done, I moved on to the second, which was when things really got intense, with nearly humanly impossible timings, recreated 2.2 features, and even more club set monsters. For our second level, I had Monida, an actually well-structured level, and what on earth are these colors? Now this could be cheating, but I toned down the colors of the level to prevent giving myself an eyesore. Anyway, I began with adding a bunch of caramel-styled spice at the beginning. Initially, I didn't even believe this setup was possible, but somehow it is. I also turned this squash triple into a squash quadruple spike. Seriously, this looks like it was the victim of the squash from Plants vs Zombies. However, if you thought those two jumps were unplayable, wait until you see this orb combo. You have to hit both of these as late as possible to just barely make it onto this platform. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pass this timing, meaning it served its job well. But there was an issue. Due to the level's original decoration, it looked very basic and felt outdated, and I wanted to make it feel modern. Now I could have gone and went and added decoration, but I had an even better idea. Instead, I decided to make a short segment where you clip through blocks and nothing makes sense, which is exactly what this level needed to feel up to date, almost. The level still lacked a good portion of spam, which I would end up adding with these black orbs. And something you likely didn't know about black orbs is that you can actually change the rotation speed of them, which is such a niche feature, but I absolutely love it. I also noticed that the level had 2 coins in the exact same spot, and I didn't want to leave them untouched like the rest of the part, so I did this. Very pure coins, I know. If you wimped out and didn't take the coin, however, you had to carefully time these black orb clicks. If you failed, you wouldn't immediately die, as I felt like that would be too cruel. Instead, the player drinks the United States of America potion, which enlarges their size, just like the sneak peek, and causes you to be too big to fit through Jor Byron's mouth. I honestly have no idea what I was thinking about when I created this section. Finally though, the drop of the level would hit, and the player would have to give in and drink this potion, causing for a surprisingly awkward click when your hitbox doubles in the middle of the air. But with all this progress came expectations, and those I did not meet. The level wasn't confusing enough, and I felt like it could do even better, and so I created this part. This segment was brutal, and it didn't help that after finishing it, you were met with the world's hardest jump. except it probably isn't, but let's ignore that. I did notice that the cube gameplay was getting old quickly though, so I decided to throw a robot into the mix, which is known for creating some of the most tedious gameplay imaginable, perfect for this challenge. With this new advantage, I created this dash orb and portal combo, which to keep it blunt, wasn't consistent at all. But somehow I was able to push it even more. In this section, there are pink dash orbs with S-blocks overlapping them, canceling your dash orb instantly upon clicking. This segment is pure evil. Unlike many other levels, however, I felt like the last click didn't need to be anything too brutal. And all I would end up doing was placing a couple pink orbs. The only way you can pass this spike was if you got enough momentum for the orbs before the spike, which wasn't impossible, but not too easy either. With the second level done, I moved on to the final one, being a newly decorated version of Retray, which would prove to be a very difficult challenge to take on. Our final level would be Retray House Buffed, which was Retray if it was in Slaughterhouse. Now I suspect the level is a copy of Retray House, but for some reason, upon clicking the original button, it leads you to Slaughterhouse, which is very strange. Now, unlike what the title says, the only buff comes way later into the level, so it was up to me to get the job done for the rest of it. I would quickly notice how limited the beginning was, however, as I didn't have room to do much besides some simple jumps, so I had to resort to this blue pad and orb combo. Now, I know that it's pretty cheap, but the rest of the level is where it would get interesting. And lastly, before you enter the drop, you'd go into this structure and perform a controlled spam to get into the ship part. You can't click these too early either or you'll die, which is straight up evil. This ship was perfect for the challenge and I quickly transformed it into this. Now initially the part had fixed hitbox strafe fly, but since that would make it a nightmare to play, I refrained. I know my gameplay is bad, but it's not that bad. Unlike the ship, this UFO was weird. For a 2-star, this gameplay is great. It teaches the player how the UFO works, with some well-made structuring. But for an extreme demon, this was an absolute nightmare. I ended up creating these ninja star looking objects, which helped me make this part just a bit harder. Realistically, this made this section more awkward than Acheron, but let's ignore that. This challenge was finally taking a toll on me, as my ideas were running dry. Sometimes a segment of a Geometry Dash level is 1,000 words. Just look at it. With this defeat, I decided to take a break from this challenge for quite a while to hopefully rest myself. In the back of my mind, I thought this was over, but it was just the beginning. I came back later completely refreshed and quickly noticed that Potboard from the original level was missing. To avenge him, I decided to make this part brutal. Firstly, I added spikes here instead of keeping it empty like the original. This was still very easy though, so I made these spikes fixed hitbox. Surprisingly, it was still completely outmatched by every part in the level so far, so I had to keep brainstorming. Eventually, I remembered a certain part in Firework, and decided to add orbs to this segment, which significantly increased the difficulty. I was really satisfied with how this short segment went, and so I decided to continue its theme. I originally had planned to bring back the ninja star looking objects from earlier, but this new idea would turn out to be notably better. First, I would add spikes everywhere until level. If you don't add these, then it's practically free. I really liked how difficult the orbs from the Popboard segment were, so I decided to scatter them all over the part. Who cares about balancing, am I right? Little did I know, however, I had just created the hardest part of the level by far, as this section needed perfect precision to pass. But do you know what the level lacked? It wasn't enjoyability or balancing, it was an emotional story. So far, the level was void of any, and so I decided to add Jeremy, with a cannon firing directly at him. Now, personally, I would not let that slide. As silly as some of these parts of the level were though, every time I zoomed out to see my progress, I felt a strange sense of nostalgia, a feeling I hadn't felt in years. I was actually having fun. Now, despite me making content on the game, I don't find myself opening it up that often, which is completely unparalleled to when I first bought the game years ago. I remember sitting on it for hours just creating whatever I wanted. I wasn't focused on appeasing standards or meeting an expectation. I was treating it how level editors should be, a sandbox. I remember when I first found out how to use the move trigger or the text object and using it everywhere across boss fights. Every day in the editor was a new experience, and every time I had to figure out how to experiment with the game's mechanics for levels. This is exactly what I was doing currently, something I hadn't done for years. While I do enjoy being a somewhat established creator, I do truly miss when I placed my first block or when I created my first level. It's a feeling that's hard to recreate. With the part finished, I moved on to the drop. Originally in Retray, the part had no substance whatsoever, so buffing this would be challenging, right? Well, no. This was the segment I was talking about earlier where the creator actually added something to a level, albeit in a very scuffed way. Or you can slide on these blocks, unlike in Slaughterhouse. I quickly changed that, and duplicated the amount of Slaughterhouse monsters there were. To motivate the player, every time they pass one, they get congratulated by Gerald, but with a twist. Once you reach the 7th Slaughterhouse monster, Gerald says "I hate you" and forces you to do the Slaughterhouse wave. Now, Gerald didn't even have to say that, because if someone forced me to play this, I would best believe they hate me already. And after a lazy orb spam intermission, you approach the final section, which was originally a UFO. I wasn't sure what to do here, as it's nearly impossible to create hard UFO gameplay nowadays, so I opted into turning it into a wave instead, making it significantly more difficult. While it wasn't as hard as some of the earlier parts in the level, I thought it was pretty funny, so I kept it, finishing off the final level. I came into this challenge not expecting much, and was definitely surprised by how fun Geometry Dash can be if you treat it as your own personal sandbox. But if you want to see more recent type shenanigans, click the video on screen, because trust me, some of the stuff I found was insane, and as always, thanks for watching.